Well, let's get you more on that. As far as the counter strikes to the Iranian strikes at the U.S. military bases is concerned, in which 2 American soldiers were killed. And this is now coming across as more strikes that have been launched by the military of the United States of America. So we can note at least this would be the 8th day of consecutive strikes, and the soldiers who were killed in Jordan were the first U.S. troops to die from hostile fire since the April truce, as the U.S. forces began retaliatory strikes early on Sunday, where 2 U.S. soldiers were killed and a 3rd service member, according to reports, was missing after an Iranian attack on the base in Jordan. And U.S. military saying that it was the first death of an American service member from hostile fire since the truce in early April. Now, the Jordanian base that came under fire from Iranian ballistic missiles and drones, according to the statement by the U.S. Central Command, which oversees the operations in the region, till now 16 U.S. service members have been killed in the war. As the U.S. Central Command has come out to give a statement on the fallen and the missing U.S. Service members, and saying that 2 of the service members in Jordan were killed in action. Let's connect with Mayank on this. Well, Mayank, as we are literally just adding up the days because the strikes continue. Today, the 8th day is being observed, and now casualties are also being reported on the U.S. side.
Yeah. Definitely, and 16 as you counted the casualties of the soldiers of US as of now. Mind it, Jordan is a sort of a country which is landlocked and which is closer to US and far away, much farther away from, closer to Israel and farther away from Iran. In that case, and if you, just to remind the viewers and also to reminisce the way the 39-day war had been happening, Jordan was not in the scene. Suddenly Jordan has come because lots of operations had been taking place from that side, and as ballistic missiles have been fired, they had struck the soldiers, the base there. Destruction has taken place. People have also got injured that side, which means this is getting interesting in the sense that while US is using newer places to launch its operations, Iran is also trying to now target those places and is finding new targets. That's getting interesting because apart from the names which we had been hearing, like Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, even in fact Saudi Arabia to an extent was one of them which we had continuously heard during 39-day war. But Jordan is something new, which means that much of the operations are concentrated from that area.
Yes.
Interestingly, the other point is US forces have been aiming only one thing, which is that to debilitate or to bring down the capabilities of Iranians in such a way that they are not able to hinder the operations or the movement within the Strait of Hormuz. That means it becomes the topmost priority as of now for the people, because 20% of the fuel and its derivatives have vanished since
so that means
28th
that,
of February.
In the entire region, the war seems to be expanding to the other regions that may have not come under attack before, and that seems to be the strategic tactic that seems to be taken up both by the US military and the retaliation that Iran has been doing. Strategic tactical development, that what we are now looking at. But let's in the meantime also talk about the counter that has done by the US as far as these strikes on Iran is concerned, because this is key targets that are now being struck on part of the US military as they continue with another night of strikes that have followed. And this is coming at a time where the latest wave of strikes against Iran, in particular southern Iran, that has come under repeated attack. So the US forces, including fighter jets, aerial drones, warships, launched precision munition that hit dozens of Iranian military. And this has now been said on part of the US forces that have been targeting multiple areas in southern Iran. So Iran's key targets that have been struck by US explosions in Bandar Abbas and Qeshm Islands, as 6 missiles have hit the outskirts of Iran's Qeshm Island. Mayank, these are the areas which are strategic to the IRGC as well, and important ports which are necessary and wanted by Iran as far as its commercial shipping is concerned. That already has been blocked by the US naval blockade.
Precisely, Amita. What you have brought out is actually, see, the bases which are coastal actually, in this case, the focus since last 8 days has been that the areas which are in coastal areas and which have a direct bearing on the movement of the vessels within Strait of Hormuz need to be knocked off. That is the way it is. And in case of any such war, there has to be a 24 observation, surveillance, intelligence gathering has to be there. So what you see is actually when precision-guided munitions are used, that means intelligence has to be very precise. Thus, it happens that wherever the fighting is taking place, from at least from the Iranian side, they are being marked, they are being hit in the subsequent strikes which are taking place. So, but what is interesting is actually the strikes are multiple from the US side, which means Iranians are able to not only site their silos to fire the missiles and to fire the drones also, and they are able to strike things and use multiple missiles which earlier were cruise, and in this case when Jordan was hit, it was ballistic missile. So it also becomes interesting because quid pro quo, or I mean things are happening like that, retaliations are taking place. Interestingly, but then in that case, nothing has been able to cross Strait of Hormuz because of the kind of condition we have seen right now, Amita.
So far, no impact or strike in Bandar Abbas that has been confirmed of causing any damage to residential or to commercial infrastructure, but that seems the latest aim that has been of the US military. So civilian infrastructure that has also come under attack. There has been report of power outages as well. But in the meantime, speaking of the new Supreme Leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, he now seems to be coming out to mock President United States of America. He's saying that the naive fantasy jibe on Trump, where Mojtaba seems to be hurling the great Satan jibe at the US. Iranian Supreme Leader is now accusing the US of betrayal, and he is now saying that it is the United States of America which actually failed to live up with the promise on the signing of the peace deal. So Mayank essentially saying that the signature of President Trump does not mean anything.
Interesting, whatever is happening is sort of a narrative, narrative of war, a narrative of war actually. I mean, in this case, whatever is happening, one side is trying to either bring down the trust, credibility of the other side, or they are questioning, mocking the other side, so as to hit on the morale of the forces or morale of the decision makers. And Mojtaba Khamenei's statements is in that regard only. But then what you see is actually, interestingly, 14-point MOU, when it was signed, it was seen to be a light at the end of the tunnel. But it has again begun in such a way that we are counting the days now, which has turned out to be 8. So it is making things difficult because after the ceasefire, which was expected after 14-point MOU was signed, nothing seems to be coming on ground actually. Manifestation is really devastating in that case, and that is going to affect not only the larger globe as it was earlier in 39 days, it is going to affect India specifically again back, Amita. So whatever the two leaders had decided, it definitely becomes a question mark on the kind of decisions which were taking place on that regard.
Yes, because it is now turning into a war of rhetoric as well, and name calling and all of that narrative that has now been set. Of course, it's now coming in from the leaders of both the US and from the Iranian side as well. Please to stay on with us, Mayanka, because over this recent strikes and counter strikes that has now been carried out, the UAE meanwhile has been expressing deep concerns, and it has also called for immediate de-escalation. The UAE, which has condemned the attack on civilian infrastructure and is now stressing the return on the negotiating table, and this is now coming across as the UAE coming out to say and expressing deep concern over the regional developments and calling for immediate de-escalation as far as when it comes to military bases in the Gulf region, and multiple Gulf countries which are hosting the military bases of the United States have come under repeated attacks, and UAE, Mayank, was also amongst them.
Amita, it is a very important point. And finally, what you see is actually lots of ingresses have taken place, at least when it comes to air defenses or sort of security umbrella which was around these countries. And we had been reporting all of them, right from what is happening right now in Jordan to UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, even Saudi Arabia. That is the way things have changed in this area. So, every country would want that peace prevails because destruction finally is happening in those geographical areas which is within these countries, because territorially, geographically, US is much farther away from these places. So destruction, collateral damage is taking place in these nations, and Iran has claimed or has always proclaimed, saying that any area which is being used to launch operations upon them, even if it is sited in these countries, will be treated as enemy area, and it becomes legal for them to launch the strikes and operations upon them, treating them as enemy area, Amita. Yes. So these countries, the way statements are coming out from these nations.
GCC countries in particular, because they depend on the strait for the export of oil and gas, while for the EU it is about around 10% of its oil supply that comes from that region, and most of it is passing through this very critical waterway. Well, Mayank, appreciate you joining us here on the broadcast. Those are the updates that we are tracking for you this morning coming in from the Middle East.